I'm Priscilla Huff in Washington. I'm speaking with Dr. Harold Brooks. He is a research meteorologist with NOAA's National Severe Storm Laboratory. Dr. Brooks, thank you so much for joining us today. Hundreds of Americans have died in a series of very violent tornadoes this year in the United States. Is this season worse than previous years? Is this just a bad year for tornadoes?
Well, it certainly has been a very bad year for tornadoes. It's the largest death toll we've seen from tornadoes since 1953 in the United States.
How does a tornado happen? I mean, these storms seem particularly strong and violent this year.
Tornadoes this year have actually been more violent than typically. What we look for when we talk about how tornadoes form is we look for a set of ingredients. We want to have lots of warm, moist air near the ground. We want to have relatively cold, dry air aloft. We want to have the winds blowing out of the south at low levels and the winds blowing out of the west in upper levels of the atmosphere. And one of the big things we look for when we talk about the intensity of tornadoes, as well as the number of tornadoes, is how strong that change of the winds is with height. And particularly in the month of April, that was much stronger than normal.
Are tornadoes unique to the United States, and are they unique to the Midwest? Because it seems most of the storms are happening in the center of the country.
Although the central part of the United States is the place on the planet where the most tornadoes and certainly the most violent tornadoes occur, tornadoes have been observed on every continent of the world except for Antarctica. There are lots of other places that get them, the central part of South America, Bangladesh, southeastern South Africa, the northern part of Europe, and Australia are all places where we see significant numbers of tornadoes.
Some have blamed climate change, that generally weather around the world is just getting much more extreme, and that's one of the reasons why the tornado season in the United States is getting more extreme. What is your research telling you about America's tornado seasons?
Well, there's really no evidence to suggest that this year has been impacted in any significant way by the warming of the planet. When we look at what we expect to happen in the future, there's one of the primary ingredients we look for will increase in being favorable for tornadoes, but another one of them will actually get less favorable for tornadoes. And the balance is really hard to tell what will happen. When we look at the historical record and we try to adjust for the various changes that have occurred in our reporting practices for tornadoes over the last 50 or 60 years, what we actually find is that there's no correlation between the number and the intensity of tornadoes and the planet's temperature or even the United States' temperature. So we really don't think there's much evidence to suggest that climate change plays a measurable role in these tornadoes.
Are we at the end of tornado season, or do Americans need to continue to listen out for their weather radios and those sirens and take cover when they hear those warnings come?
Americans certainly need to continue to pay attention. Typically, the middle of the tornado season is roughly the end of May in the United States. By the end of June, 2/3 of all tornadoes typically have occurred. So we've still got a long way to go in the season, and the American public still needs to be paying attention to forecasts from the National Weather Service and from information from their local media in order to stay safe.
Now, you're in Norman, Oklahoma, and I understand your offices were even in the path of a tornado. Is this something that is just part of life in this part of the country, or is something that you really worry about?
Well, in general, tornadoes are a fact of life in this part of the world, in Oklahoma. And the chances of any individual place getting hit isn't very great. Now, on Tuesday night, there were tornadoes that came very close to where we are here. And in fact, I actually had debris from one of the tornadoes land in my yard. So, things were relatively close. And Tuesday was probably about as nervous as have ever felt personally about tornadoes in Oklahoma. But I recognize from my research that the chances of my house getting hit are actually fairly small, even in the middle of the most common place for tornadoes on the planet.
Thank you. That was Dr. Harold Brooks. He is a research meteorologist with NOAA's National Severe Storm Laboratory based in Norman, Oklahoma. I'm Priscilla Huff in Washington.